we're in.
Hello, welcome to Framework. And this is our beginning of our new series, the Nolan-oscopy, on our look deep into the bowels of the filmography of Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, a probing look at the entire filmography. Yeah,
indeed. That title lost out to Picture Me Nolan by a hair, but here we are. And I, of course, am one of the hosts of Framework, Al Schwartz. With me is John Bernard.
Hi.
Hey. And we're starting off with Following here, Christopher Nolan's debut feature from 1998, let's say.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to be a short one because it's not a long movie. It's like 70 minutes long, but it's also like palpably, it's a short film being expanded to feature length. And as such, you can really kind of like feel it groping for a third act to attach to this premise. And I'm not sure it ever really gets there. It winds up being kind of most interesting, I think, as a sort of a demo, a prototype for what a lot of the ideas that would end up going into Memento, and really working a lot better there.
Yeah, this is a calling card film, and it feels like one more than anything ever. This is just like, here's a guy who can shoot a thing and has a point of view, and his movies will feel this way. And this isn't quite the thing yet, though. This is clearly an exercise,
a student film,
proof of concept. Yeah,
it feels like a very accomplished student film. Is my
for sure, assessment. As you might expect from a director who would become so enormous in the culture, such a humongous director for the last decade. Well, I guess really the last 15 years, more than or so, right? I mean,
I guess since Batman, well, I don't know. Memento, like, kind of really did put him on the map.
You're right. Memento is an out of the gate hit. So let's say last 20 plus years.
For all the good that did Insomnia, though, like, I don't, he would not be a household name without Batman.
Of course,
as much as I'm sure that chagrins him a bit, but it is definitely true. Like, I don't think he ever gets to make Inception, first of all, but it also, I don't think Inception becomes sort of a cultural, point of reference the way it does. If it doesn't get seen by people.
It doesn't get made with that budget either. It's such it's an event picture with no IP attached to it. No franchise potential. I mean, it's got stars, but otherwise it is, it has so few of the things. We're talking about Inception. Anything to talk about something other than Following. You've all seen Inception. That's really what its deal is, and we'll talk about that more later. Now we're talking about Following.
Well, the Inception, I think, is a point of reference for how I was watching Following, because the thing when we get to Inception, we'll talk about there. First of all, it's got the main character has the same name and same fashion sense, which you don't really have to Google it to figure out that, that's probably modeled off the writer director. He's a man of this age and build, and but really, like, the take on Inception that I think is pretty commonly known throughout the internet, at least, is that it is a allegory for filmmaking, and various members of the heist crew correlate to different members of a film crew, and it's all about smuggling your themes in a way that mass audiences will accept them. So as we were going through the rest of these, trying to figure out what makes Christopher Nolan tick, that is something that I'm maybe having an eye on, that, like, a lot of his movies are sort of allegorical about filmmaking or about storytelling. And in Following, it's about sort of how you create a character, how you decide what to focus on, and the idea that the main character Cobb gets mixed up, or no, Cobb's not the main character here. He's just the most interesting character.
Yes.
I don't think we ever learned the real name of the main character in this. He goes by whatever, but
he's billed as the young man.
Right.
Yeah, I was in my notes. I was calling him Follower. Yeah.
They should have billed him as that. Yeah, that would be better. Anyway, but he falls in with this debonair burglar Cobb, who sort of shows him the ropes of burgling people, and presents burgling as a sort of like a vocation more. It's not just a way to generate cash. it is a philosophical pursuit. It is,
Yes.
to get inside a stranger's personal space, and then how that gets you into their head, and you can sort of see their entire lives from the inside before, without them knowing who you are, and then also being able to disrupt it from the inside. And that presents it that breaking into somebody's house challenges them, and it shows them the things they take for granted, which is sort of, if you're reading a screenwriting manual, it's going to tell you about how your main character should be and how you need to like figure out what their problem is and challenge them on it in the most jarring way you can, and push them to the breaking point so they can be rebuilt as a better version of themselves in the climax.
Yes. And then as the story progresses, we kind of find out that this persona that Cobb has affected is in fact a created persona in order to play to his audience, to follower, who has similar philosophical approaches in his life, similar sense of needing intimacy and needing to understand people better, and a disassociation from humanity that this plays all into directly. It's kind of nuts that Cobb has figured him out so completely.
Yeah, like before they even start talking, really.
Right.
But it's also, the follower is explicitly a failed writer, or at least like a writer who hasn't started yet, who's struggling to like find a way into his big story.
I feel like we do need to talk a little bit about the narrative of this, actually, and that, I mean, okay. I feel like not many people have seen this film,
Sure.
And this might be a movie like that you might listen to this podcast without actually having seen. I don't think that would be the case with most films we do, but this one, like, you got to really seek this one out. You got to be like, I'm very committed to seeing every Nolan film.
There's probably a decent number of people too who have seen every Christopher Nolan film but this one.
Yeah, like me before this thing. Yeah, this was the one I hadn't sseen, and yeah, I mean, it's very much Baby Nolan. All the stuff is here. It's all the weird Nolan stuff that you attribute to him. The temporal fuckery. Like why?
Down to that.
Why is this happening before? We already know that this happens later, and that sort of stuff. And then
why is he spitting out a white glove?
Yeah, yes, the propulsive atonal heartbeat of a score. That it doesn't really have a theme, but it just sort of has a pulse to it that matches the action of the scene. It feels like Inception music sometimes, or baby Inception music, and
the sort of like femme fatale that initially presents herself as sort of a damsel that the protagonist is sort of trying to help out, but it turns out she's actually manipulating him, which will be done to much more successful effect, I think, in Memento. Successful.
And so many other noirs. Like, that's the other thing, that this just has a fresh coat of film noir all over it, kind of covering all the things that he's clearly more interested in. This sort of disassociation and mental programming that is going on throughout it is sort of where his interest clearly lies. But then there's also just like femme fatale, and there's a gangster, and there's con artists, and there's burglary, and all that surface level stuff, almost in the way of the actual meat of it, I think.
So let's just recap the plot then, I guess. We probably should have done it at the top. But so we start with, we're going around, we're following our protagonist, who is a guy struggling with writer's block. He's not really written anything yet, but professes to be a writer. And he fills his time just picking strangers out of the crowds and just following them around for the day and flying them home. And this is, presented as, it's not a sex thing. it's not that voyeuristic creepy thing. He's sort of just groping for a way to jar himself out of writer's block, like trying to find inspiration
and just find connection. I feel like find an intimacy. He seems like a very lonely guy, like who doesn't feel comfortable in his own skin, doesn't feel comfortable with other people, finds it difficult to interact with them. This is a way to become intimate with somebody in a completely one-sided way.
Yeah, maybe that's a good thing to track for Christopher Nolan stuff too.
Yeah.
Intimacy issues. He is a sort of notoriously asexual filmmaker. So one of the people that the follower follows turns out to be a burglar named Cobb, who kind of turns the tables on him, spots him, his tail, and says, corners him and says, who are you? Why are you following me? Blah blah blah, and then decides, sort of on a whim, it seems, to like, all right, well, why don't you follow me around while I burgle, and I can show you the ropes of this. And it's, burgling is, I guess, a more invasive, more advanced form of stalking, uh, and they, you know, start breaking into houses, apartments. Um, they and then the follower eventually strikes up a relationship with the one of the women that they whose apartment they broke into, um, which is sort of breaking the rules, obviously. And then she turns out to be the sort of gangster's mole, and he gets embroiled trying to like uh, get her out from under this blackmail scheme that her gangster ex-boyfriend is using to extort her. Um, he winds up killing a guy with a hammer while doing that. Uh, and he and Cobb the burglar have a falling out. It's revealed towards the end that Cobb was working with the gangster's girl to set up the follower, draw suspicion away from a murder rap that the burglar found a dead body in one of the houses that he broke into, and was then spotted leaving the house. So he feels like he's going to get, even though he didn't kill this woman, is going to be sent away for it. So he's set up this guy to like be another burglar who's roughly his age and demographic, that follows the same modus operandi and presents a better suspect for the police. Um, and then it turns out also the burglar is working with the gangster to set up the femme fatale, and he kills her with the same hammer, further setting up Cobb. Honestly, I'm not sure that we needed the woman to be murdered at the end of this, except that it just needed an ending.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are maybe one step too far in this to make narrative sense, but it doesn't really, matter. It's like I
It
said,
feels
the
like there's a
noir
lot of
stuff.
plot piling up there in the last like 15-20 minutes of this 70-minute movie.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where I get the sense that, like, okay, we had this concept about, guy who stalks people as a, whatever, as a way of reaching out and trying to jar himself out of writer's block, and then that extends into burglary, and we kind of get that, and then it's like, okay, where's our story here? Well, I don't know. Maybe we got to get a gangster involved here so that there's like life and death stakes at some point. Um, and then there needs to be a twist ending.
Yeah, and all this stuff. I mean, it feels like very much like, hey, I can make a thriller. Like
Mm.
hire me to make your thriller. I can do it. The stuff that most interested me was definitely that early stuff. The stuff
Mm-hmm.
about the guy following people, and his relationship with the thief Cobb. And now that the thief's burglary thing kind of overlapped with the following, in that there's the voyeuristic thrill of it, and there's some danger, but not too much. A comfortable amount of danger, and a way to
Yeah,
be
and they're sort of
intimate with
gradually pushing
people.
it
And
farther and farther. So yeah, of course, it's going
yeah,
to end up in life and death at the end. But you're right. I think it's
yeah, no,
it's actually more compelling. There's early parts where it feels like it's almost like an adaptation of a first person novel, where
or a short story,
it's,
or like
yeah,
that's what it feels like. And then all of a sudden, it's like, no, it's a movie. It's a full movie. We have an entire
it's
movie
a
to do here,
Hollywood
even if
thriller.
it's 70 minutes. And it's not that that's bad. It's like you say, real good as a calling card. It shows that he can do these things. But yeah, I think the most interesting stuff by far is just sort of the psychological assessment of these guys at the beginning, when they're just sort of aimlessly floating around trying to find something to connect to, and so they end up just sort of falling into stalking.
Yeah,
That's interesting, and that seems to be unique. Like, that's not a movie that you've seen as often as you've seen all these noir beats, which are not
yeah,
like exceptional here. Like they're pretty much bog standard noir stuff. The femme fatale is the most femme fatale ever, and you know, within 5 minutes of that character being introduced, like if I were follower in that situation, I'd be like, oh, I got to get out of here. This is a noir starting up. Like, I can't trust her at all. I'm going to
well,
get murdered. Yeah.
he actually insinuates himself there, that
Mm-hmm.
after he had followed her to begin with, and I think he made a point that, like, this is the first time I broke my rules, is that I never followed anybody more than once until her. And then he sort of guides the burglar into burgling her house, and then after that he goes and initiates contact with her. Um, all of which makes it kind of convenient at the end when it turns out it's all an elaborate setup on him when he like did so much of the legwork to,
Right, yeah.
to set himself up there.
Well, they had incredible psychological insight to him immediately, which, I mean, you'll see stuff like this in Inception, as you say, and Memento, and all the thrillers that he went on to do, where it's about playing to an audience, where it's about programming somebody based on who they are and who you know they are, and that's pretty cool to track, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's again that'll be done to better effect in Memento, and then I think a much better, especially like better metaphorical effect in the Prestige and Inception, which are about manipulating audiences. You know, but and I think you were right earlier that basically it's most compelling in the early going when things are a little bit simpler, and then towards the end it gets both more complicated and more generic.
Yeah,
at the same time.
It has much more of its own identity in the first half hour. You know, and after that it's been like, well, here's the stuff that you are expecting from this, and it also is, you know, kind of setting up, I guess, just who Nolan will be, because obviously I don't think you watch this movie unless you're like, I want to watch Christopher Nolan's first movie. Like, it doesn't seem like a movie that would be watched for any other reason in 2021 other than Nolan's first film.
No, I was shocked when I queued this up and it had the Criterion Collection thing popped up, logo popped up. I was like, really? This? Like, by the end, I'm like, this does not deserve the Criterion treatment on its own merits.
Well, it's clearly just because it's Nolan, though. I mean, that's it. That's the reason to watch this film. And, you know, otherwise it's, you know, there's a lot of other noirs and a lot of other student films you could watch. This one just, you know, well, on the other hand, though.
The other reason is because it's short.
I like that. Yeah.
It's got one really good performance in it. And I think almost to the movie's detriment, like it is so overpowered by one performance. Like the main character, the protagonist, is so overshadowed by the burglar cop.
Completely.
Which is crazy because that is a guy who never acted again.
He became an architect, right?
Yeah, he was an architecture student that is just like a friend of Nolan's.
He's great.
And he is, yeah, he's so like charismatic and just completely kind of blows the follower off the screen. He's so much more compelling. It's crazy to me that he never acted again. It's not crazy to me that Nolan had a buddy from architecture school, because like that he wanted to put in a movie, because like as a filmmaker he is like a great architect. You know?
That's funny. Yes, yeah, intricate structural compositions. Yes, that makes all the sense in the world. And I mean all the things being set up here, and patterns, and just the way that it's all, you know, I don't know, it's probably structured like a rhombus or a Mobius strip or something in a way I'm not catching quite. But it's all there, like, you know, the glove or the way that we find out that they burgled her place is by her explaining it was burgled after they've done it, but we haven't even met her yet. All this weird time folding in on itself thing. You could do none of that in this story and it would be fine. Like, you don't need any of that complication to make the narrative of following work, but it's showy, you know, it's very much the kind of the thrill of it.
I don't know, the movie would be any less compelling without this sort of, you know, temporal fuckery and the sort of structural elaborations. But you get the sense that that's the only way that Nolan could stay interested enough in this material to do a full-length movie with it, is that he was also needed to challenge himself in these other like structural ways with the screenwriting of things.
It is interesting. Like I was wondering throughout this, like how much of my reaction to this is based entirely on just like what I know of Nolan from seeing all the films he made after this. Like, what am I attaching to this that I wouldn't have noticed if this was just some movie I watched on its own? But then again, that's not really an important distinction because, you know, like I was just saying, the reason anyone would watch this is because you want to see a Nolan movie before he was Nolan. And that is exactly what it is. So, I
mean,
you know,
as it's a thought experiment of like, what would I think of this if it wasn't a Nolan movie? But it's like, you're right, it's completely irrelevant because it's the only way to experience it in the modern day. And if there would be no other way that this movie would live on and like be on anybody's radar.
Never would have.
If the filmmaker had not gone on to do other things, I guess maybe if the architect guy had gone on to become a movie star.
But that's like another, there's a what if, a Nolan verse what if for you, like that, because that is the guy in this. Like, I'm surprised he didn't end up in other stuff. there are actors in this who went on to be in other Nolan films. The one that I really recognized was the cop, who you think is a therapist, but then turns out to be a cop.
Isn't that Nolan's father?
Is that Nolan's father?
I
It
think
was
it's.
no.
I thought I saw Jonathan Nolan in
Oh,
the credits.
I gotta double check this now because I recognized him as like the apple certainly fell far from the tree, Mr. Wayne. You know, he was that guy.
Well, he seems like he's almost doing a John Hurt impression, but it's John Nolan.
That's got to be his
his name.
dad. Okay, well that makes sense then. All right.
Yeah, no, uncle of director Christopher Nolan and writer Jonathan Nolan. So it's
right.
Nolan's uncle. Okay, but that makes sense.
It is weird that guy keeps hanging out with Bruce Wayne even into the third film. But yeah, it's. I mean, I could imagine a version of I don't even remember the guy's name. The guy who plays Cobb. Like, yeah, he could have showed up in all these movies. He could have been like the John Goodman of Nolan. You know, for the or like the way that the Coens use Goodman or something. This guy has the ability to do Nolan material very well, and I would be interested to see him now. You know, as an actor, 25 years older, of course. This is his only credit, you know.
if he wanted to show back up now, by all means, do it. I mean, but
yeah, he would have been cool in the Batman film. He could have been in one of those. He could have been one of the guys. That would have been great. One of the gangsters. I don't know. Hey, but
he might have been better than Eric Roberts. I don't know. Well, we'll have a Dark Knight podcast at some point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the gangsters in the Nolan Batman movies stand out a bit to me from the rest of the milieu.
I love them. I can't wait to talk about Tom Wilkinson.
yeah, anything but following. Anyways.
No, following's okay. It's not like I didn't hate this at all. Like there are movies by Nolan made that I definitely like less than this one. Because I'm not a huge Nolan fan, to be honest. This is going to be interesting. I'm going to be forced to sort of re-experience some ones that I was just like, fuck that shit initially. And
he's got some really good ones.
Oh sure.
I just think his weaknesses, I guess, they don't always sink the movie, but I find them very frustrating. In that they
draw attention to themselves in a way that's not always helpful. You know, Tenet you haven't seen, right? That one is the sort of the ultimate in that regard. But you know, I don't know. It's tough because sometimes the things that I that are so distinctly Nolan are what makes the movies good. Like in Dunkirk, you know,
Inception.
Like,
Dunkirk.
Sometimes the whole movie is his idiosyncrasies and his odd things that he does unusual or better than other people. But sometimes they get in the way in a big way, and I'm curious to kind of chart why that is for me in some cases and not in others. I mean, I certainly understand why people love him, why he has such a fan base. Yeah,
he's a unique talent and a great creator of like puzzles. He would, I don't know. You almost feel like he missed his calling, like designing escape rooms. But you know, he's great at designing elaborate plots and structures. He's just pretty bad at rendering anything related to sex or humor. And those are some pretty big parts of the human experience to just be like completely deficient in.
I mean, you know, when he's being forced into studio mode, I think he finds some facility with humor, at least. Like,
I don't know. I think even in his Inception or The Dark Knight have a couple of like okay gags on them, but they're pretty few and far between.
Heath Ledger's very funny. In that, but that he is sort of a standout in that sense. I don't think you can point at any other character that is funny in any Nolan film. And sex,
none of that carried over into The Dark Knight Rises. The Bane, the humor there is all completely unintentional humor around Bane.
Yes. Already tipping our hand on what we think of that film, I guess. There is like sex though. Like there is no sex in this film noir with a femme fatale. She doesn't even pretend to be attracted to follow her. You know, there's not even really a seduction there. It's just she allows him to talk to her for a while and then quickly asks him to start doing crimes for her.
Yeah. But that's enough for him because he is,
Right.
I guess, I mean, our conjecture here is he's a Nolan stand-in. So, the intimacy of having a one-on-one conversation is like enough.
Right.
They're like,
Yeah, she's
I mean,
opening up to him. That is the most interaction on and sort of intimacy and connection he experiences in the film, I guess. So yeah, I guess that'll be enough.
Yeah.
But that is it. That is enough. There's no pretense of a seduction there. It's what you would really expect in film noir.
They have a little argument, her and the burglar, about, did you sleep with him? And she's like, you told me to. And he says, well, I told you to do it if you had to. That doesn't mean go do it. But it's not. It's after the fact. It's not like we get a sex scene or even like the start of a sex scene that cuts away. It is sort of a clinical dissection after the fact.
Yeah.
Why would you engage in familiar relations with this person? Maybe that's a question that, we had the whole QT question as our framing device for that Tarantino series. Maybe the big question of Nolan-oscopy is to ask, is Christopher Nolan actually asexual? Like, clinically.
I mean, it would make so much sense now that you mention it. I mean, it's
it would not be shocking to hear that.
Yeah, and I'm not in like a ha-ha kind of way either. Like,
No.
but it really does seem to interest him not at all. I mean, there are many, relationships and characters that should be more sexual in his films that would naturally be more Catwoman, the least sexual Catwoman for sure. But that's kind of true of all of his movies. Like there's a love triangle in The Prestige between Christian Bale, Scarlett Johansson, and Hugh Jackman with no heat, none. No, it's completely mental. Like there's no physicality to those performances at all in that movie beyond just their particular brand of showmanship and stagecraft.
On stage there's some physicality. Yeah, you're right.
It's I mean, we're definitely gonna have to look at this, as we go through these. I don't know. Without thinking about it, what is the best relationship in a Nolan film off the top of your head?
Romantic relationship?
Yeah, best romantic relationship in a Nolan film.
I'm trying to think of all of the.
So many dead wives. Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to go with DiCaprio and Marion Cotillard.
That is not even.
It's not great.
No. I mean, no. I honestly, it's. I guess the love triangle in The Dark Knight, with Maggie Gyllenhaal and. I was like, I guess it's Maggie Gyllenhaal and Christian Bale in The Dark Knight, but maybe it's Maggie Gyllenhaal and Aaron Eckhart in The Dark Knight.
She's a better suited to Eckhart for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
they're a better couple. Which I don't know. I think that makes the film better, but like,
no, it does. Yeah. And in that case, The Dark, Batman is more the Nolan stand-in. He's the
exactly. He doesn't fit in a relationship,
like monk figure. He has an intellectual fixation on her, but it really, you don't get the sense that he's horny for her at any point. But you know what? Here, we're drifting very far afield from following. Do we have any last
easy to do
following?
Well, I mean, it's like we were saying, all the fun things that kind of pop up while you're watching it mostly are related to Christopher Nolan. Oh, hey, that guy's got a Batman sticker on his door. Stuff like that just sort of notice and just sort of pops in your head, and you can't be like, yep, because it's Christopher Nolan who directed this. There's a part where
what's most interesting is interesting because it seeds for things that we we'll see later in his filmography that are more interesting in other contexts.
I mean, and that is kind of the reason and the interesting thing about this movie, right? And I would say that, like, if you're like me and had not seen this but had seen all the other Nolan films, it's kind of a good watch, just in that it gives you kind of a bedrock for him, and he is even more the person you thought he is at the end of it. Like all those things that I had thought about him, they were real right, like.
All right, I got one final question for you.
Yes.
We let June pick our next filmmaker for us at the end of our David Fincher series.
Yeah.
Specifically at the end of our Mank episode.
Yes.
Where I ranted and raved for a great length about how we don't need new black and white movies in the modern day. Do you think he picked Nolan because he knew that Nolan's first movie would be another black and white one?
I guarantee he had no thought of following when he made the choice.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But
But
speaking
I
of that,
fired it. I fired it up. I was like, oh, damn it.
but speaking of that, did it bother you in this one? Did it? I mean, in this case, it seems clear it was, it was done A because it's a noir, and B because it was probably less expensive. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it didn't bother me
like
that so much. Because my beef there with Mank was not so much like black and white movies suck on their own. My thing was saying we don't need to be making new black and white movies in 2020,
right.
and I don't know that we needed to be making a lot of new black and white movies in 1998 either. But it's closer. You get more slack the farther back in time you go. And it is also clearly a budgetary limitation here that they're working around, and not just an affectation that he decided to put on the way that a hipster might decide to wear a monocle. It was just Nolan was working with a budget and doing the best he could with very limited resources. I cut some slack there. Also, being in the film noir, lineage, I think helps a little bit there. So no, it didn't bother me much in this case. This movie would not be any worse in color. I'll say that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's almost something you don't notice, to be honest. Whereas Mank, you very much notice the black and white. It's presentational, performative black and white, and this one just seems like we didn't have color. What do you want?
As a budgetary thing, like the sound quality almost like stands out more than the lack of color to me.
The sound quality is kind of bad, actually. And I don't just mean the mix. I mean like the effects editing. There's a part where he knocks over he bumps into he's trying to be quiet, sneaking through a room, and he bumps into some plates, and they move a little, but there's the sound effect is like a clatter of 10, 20 plates falling on the ground. And he's like, oh no. And it doesn't quite match the image. I mean, it's film school stuff that you see, kind of in this throughout. And I guess that is also part of why the black and white isn't such a, it seems more fitting. This movie is clearly going to be playing for, festival audiences. This is not a major release. This is not a film made to make money.
It's not an IMAX movie.
Yeah. This is clearly something just for people who are going to seek it out in whatever context that would be. They're not selling this to anyone.
Yeah. I think you're right that is sort of the giveaway of a lot of like student film type stuff or low budget stuff, is especially nowadays, not so much 1998, but camera technology has advanced so much that you can film some pretty great looking stuff on your iPhone. And so it's not as much picture quality as sound design, sound quality that tends to give away the lack of budget.
It's really hard. That's tough to make it good, that stuff. And you really I mean, I think just having watched so many damn movies is my thing. But it's very obvious to me when the sound effects are not well done or not well mixed. Which, speaking of sound and how you hear things, that's another thing I'm very interested in revisiting with Nolan too.
Because he gets really good at that. Like as time goes on, he's like not in following, obviously, but that becomes a real strength of his scoring, sound design.
Well, somewhat. His audio mixes, though. Okay. His dialogue, hearing stuff. I mean, we talked about this in Fincher, who was so good at this. The actual hearing of what is being said is, I mean, it's difficult sometimes, and he is especially
that'll be a good thing to track.
Yeah, and I think I think there was a period where that wasn't an affectation that he had, when he was kind of really like when we were making like Prestige, Batman Begins, Dark Knight. None of those films are hard to hear, but they get more hard to hear as we go on. Starting with about Bane, the Bane incident.
Where he's starting to lose interest in the Batman character and franchise.
Yeah, like what if we can't hear what the villain says or whatever the idea is there. And then
that is something my hypothesis anyway that we'll just throw out there now is that that he, as time goes on, he has become more interested in just like becoming a visual filmmaker and not relying on dialogue.
Well, he's transcending in a way. I mean, it's transcending dialogue in a lot of these.
That is also such a weird thing, though, to be like becoming a more and more visual filmmaker, but also to be such an unemotional filmmaker. And
Yeah.
He's not a visceral. He's not. He doesn't work from his gut. He definitely works from his head, and trying to do that like with less dialogue. That's an interesting path to try and forge. So that'll be maybe we'll keep an eye on that as time goes forward.
Yeah, I am very curious as this goes on because I mean I feel like again we've said this already in this episode. His strange ideas and unique qualities are kind of responsible for his greatest triumphs and his biggest failures. It's going to be great. Like
Yeah.
Dunkirk. Dunkirk has so many affectations and they all work. And
Yeah.
Tenet has all of the same affectations and none of it works. I'm
But you know
excited
what?
to
If
get to
we're
the back.
repeating ourselves, then that probably means it's time to wrap up. So,
Yeah, we
by the
came
way,
back to
I don't
the
know.
full circle, right?
Yeah, 5 out of 10.
Yeah, something like that. Uh-huh.
If the concept of this movie interests you at all, then yeah, it might be worth an hour of your time.
Yeah, like if you want to see Baby Nolan stuff, it's that.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. This is probably
No.
one of the shorter ones we're going to do on Nolan. But there's just not much to say here because this is half a film or barely a film. It's kind of just a calling card, an exercise, a proof of concept. All those things we said at the beginning.
Yeah. You say it's Baby Nolan,
So
but we're also about to take an enormous leap forward because Memento is a very fully formed, still can see some budget consciousness going on, but it is a real ass Hollywood noir thriller with some of his most ambitious, structural, temporal stuff integrated in a way that still like is not really been matched by a lot of other big mainstream cinema offerings.
very similar character dynamic in that film too, as it turns out. Like the main three characters kind of mirror the ones in this a little bit. And they're all better versions in that, but
that's what I was talking about earlier. But again, we're repeating ourselves. So all right.
Yeah, it's like a Mobius strip. That's the whole. We got to do every episode like this now.
Yeah, we start and end at the same spot.
Yeah, that's that.